introduction. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is unlearning what we're taught to believe. From pretty much our first breath, we're taught about or what to believe or what to perceive about our world and ourselves. And as we evolve and mature, we get to spend a lot of time unlearning some of these negative lessons that we may have received. So it should be a fun conversation today to be exploring the unlearning. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, unlearning what we're taught to believe. So many of us have notions of ourselves as unacceptable, inadequate, unlovable, invisible, unworthy, and lots and lots of negative thoughts of ourselves. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. So we're looking at unlearning what we're taught to believe. So we're taught to believe things about ourselves. We're taught to believe things about the world, like everybody's out to get you. I'm not saying these are your beliefs or that they're universal, but they're a lot of us hold beliefs like people are out to get you, or it's a hard, cruel world, or you have to struggle and suffer to succeed in the world. Money is evil, or conversely, maybe money is all that's important. So we're taught to believe all kinds of things about ourselves, about the world, about what's real and what's not real. Maybe as a kid, you were told, oh, you're just imagining that, that we're making things up. So we were taught to deny our perceptions in many cases, deny our emotions. Maybe we're told we're too sensitive, et cetera, and or not smart enough, or things around body image, too fat, too thin, too whatever, too intense, too serious, too flighty. We learn all these things. We are taught all these things about who we are and the way the world is, the way the world works. And the thing is that when we are taught these things, we often receive them as though they're truth, rather than ideas. And the transmission of beliefs of others. So we perceive these beliefs as true and live into them as truths. So if we've been told over and over that we're unworthy, or that we, whatever it is, then we tend to operate within that definition of ourselves without ever questioning it, because it's just the way things are. And so many of our assumptions, so many of our perceptions, our beliefs, our operative reality is simply based in assumptions and false premises, or assumed premises that have never ever been challenged. And so if we are to fulfill our greatest potentials, it's necessary to challenge some of these assumptions, maybe more than some of them, to start recognizing what are the operative assumptions that I'm limiting myself with. Because while we receive these ideas, these beliefs, often from others in our world, once we've received them, ultimately they're our responsibility. We then get to be accountable for them at some point, where we then get to continue to operate under those premises, or we examine them and perhaps redefine them, redirect them. And when we do that, there are new potentials that open to us. There are new possibilities that become available. So if it makes me remember the Marianne Williamson quote, who am I to not be beautiful and extraordinary? I know I'm misquoting, paraphrasing here, but that we absorb these beliefs and perceptions as ways to limit ourselves, rather than to find a pathway to our fullest expression, to be the full light that we shine, or that we can shine in the world. It's so interesting to me how people will fight for their limitations. I think we've probably all done it. Fight for our limitations. And when we fight for our limitations, we get to keep them. And one way that it looks like, when we're fighting for our limitations, it looks like saying things like, I can't do that because of this, that, or the other thing. And this, that, or the other thing may seem utterly rational. It may be validated on all kinds of levels. So for example, this was such a cool example, I think. A relative of mine was looking for a house, and they had been looking for a house for a while. And they were saying, well, the market's terrible and the prices are high, and all of these situations, all of these circumstances. And then what we did was we sat down and we said, okay, well, what kind of house do you want? What, if you were to make it up, what would you really like? And they wrote down a list of all the things that they just would love in a house, including the price. And within weeks, they found that house. And it met all their criteria. It met all their expectations, because on some level, they were able to put this thing together and say, yep, that's what I want. I don't think that they really believed it, but they wanted it, but they weren't attached to it. And bam, it showed up, in spite of all the impossibility of it. And so I've recently had the occasion to speak with somebody about certain business opportunities, and the same cascade of excuses or justifications or quote unquote realities, uh, a litany of them came in to justify why this whole thing was an impossibility, and essentially why they shouldn't even try because it was futile. And we were able to discover that at the root of that was their own internal conflict about having this manifestation of their business show up. And so with the relief of the conflict, the whole field of energy changes. And if we think about energy fields, if we think about that thoughts are things in terms of energy, that there's a frequency to different thoughts and different emotions, if we can imagine that when we are learning all these things as kids, we're being programmed essentially. It's like a radio that's tuned to a particular station where there's a certain frequency that is being received on that radio. And what happens is that even if we don't like the music being played on that station, we're kind of stuck there unless we take active measures to transform that energy, to move that frequency to another band of frequency where we can receive different messages. And I think this is a great analogy, actually, because it really is that way, that all these different frequencies are available at any given time. And depending upon the thoughts that we're tuned into, then we receive different input. And we experience different experiences. We perceive things in a different way when we have a different energy, when we are vibrating or operating at a different frequency, sending and receiving at a different frequency. So if we are in a frequency, for instance, of the world is a dangerous place, then we're going to be tuned to danger. We're going to be perceiving and experiencing danger. Now, this isn't to be Pollyanna to say that there aren't situations that are dangerous situations that we're unable to perceive on another level. We're not blocking perception or awareness, but what happens is that we're not drawn to circumstances where that danger resides as readily. The danger breeds danger. The energy of that field that we reside in perpetuates itself. And so that gives us a dilemma, in this unlearning what we're taught to believe. It gives us a dilemma to find ways to step out of that frequency, to move ourselves out of it. It's a challenge to do that because, first of all, we have to recognize that that's an option. And then we need to discover ways to elevate our frequency or to shift it. And so what kinds of ways can we do that? It's fascinating. I was talking with someone who was experiencing deep anxiety and upset. And what we did was focus on the body and take a minute to do deep diaphragmatic breathing, breathing into the belly, and recognizing that something that simple could make a profound difference in the experience of anxiety, that the anxiety would dissolve, that the body calmed, that the shoulders relaxed as the diaphragmatic breathing process proceeded. This was a way that that person was able to sort of separate themselves from that learned pattern and start cultivating new pathways of knowing. So that's one way that we can start to move ourselves into a different frequency, is by focusing on our breath, by becoming present to this moment, to our bodies. And I think there's an element of grace to it. There's certainly an element of will, where it takes deliberate intention, I think, most of the time anyway, to elevate your frequency, to move out of a frequency of, for instance, despair and depression, something that I'm quite familiar with in my life. Most of my life, I was probably clinically depressed most of the time for years and years. And it took really deliberate, concentrated intention and effort to shift my being from a very low frequency to elevate that. And it may seem counterintuitive, but when we oftentimes people will get overwhelmed in work, for example, with so much to do, so many deadlines, feeling completely overwhelmed and overwrought and pressured. And in those circumstances, typically what people will do is push ourselves to get through and do whatever it is that we have to do to make our deadline. And when we're talking about frequency, that frequency of stress and overwhelm is debilitating. And what I discovered worked for me, may work for you, it was in those moments to just stop, go do something that brought me pleasure, that brought me relief. Like, I love taking photographs of nature. So I would go out, and first of all, being outside is a wonderful thing, being in nature, and then being able to connect with beauty in the world, which was deeply enriching and shifted the whole dynamic of that energy so that I could then go back renewed, feeling refreshed and centered and present. And I remember that was something that I employed when I was in the process of writing a book, and I just felt so blocked and so stressed. And then to just go and do something that would release all that, it kind of like taking the lid off a pot that was boiling, so that the vapors could dissipate, and so that energy could shift and then come back to something from a new place. And so this unlearning what we're taught, one of the things that we're taught is push, 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 drive, 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 more, more, more. Questioning that whole quote unquote work ethic is, I believe, something that can lead us into a better world. It's some of these fundamental assumptions of how we define success, how we define worthiness, how we define what's important, that I think we get to question, because so much of our culture is based on the assumption of unworthiness and the need for redemption or the need for achievement to validate ourselves, rather than being worthy and not having that worthiness dependent upon externalities, not having that worthiness depend on the way the amount of money we make, or the place we live, or the clothes we wear, or the people we know, or to just be inherently worthy. We are taught that is not the case. And if we can unlearn that primary lesson, if we can unlearn the primary lesson that we're separate, and that people are out to get us, and that it's a dangerous world, if we can start to create something new rather than those perceptions, then our experience of the world will be quite different. As we elevate ourselves, we elevate the field, the general field that connects each and every one of us. While the truth is, while we look like we're separate, the truth is that we're all part of one bigger, greater organism. We're all part of one thing. We are all inextricably connected. And as we can recognize that each of us is an expression of life in a unique kind of pattern, but that we are all life expressing itself, as we can connect to that, there's so much more possibility. There's so much more room for love and connection, collaboration, potentials. There's so much more available to us as we recognize that we're part of this whole thing. Then what happens is our values shift, our willingness to connect with nature, with each other, with ourselves, expands and deepens. And our resulting actions then reflect that expansiveness and that shift. So the key first to unlearning what we're taught is to recognize that so many of these ideas that we have are just things we've been taught, that it's not the way things are, as in a capital R reality, that it's simply our programming that we're living through. And if we can recognize these things that are operative in our experience, then we get to question those things. And in questioning those things, we open ourselves up to freedom, to actually choosing, rather than being at the effect of whatever that programming, whatever that conditioning was. So the first step is to notice what's the operative assumption here. if I'm suffering, what is the thing that I'm thinking that is generating that suffering? What is the conversation that I have going on in my head that is generating that suffering? And what's underlying that? And how might we question that assumption? How might we create a new conversation? How might we find a way to perceive that circumstance from a different lens? How might we elevate our frequency? It was beautiful. The other day, I was in doing a session with someone, and it was pretty profound. There was this dilemma of how to organize all these people to create a result that was collaborative, and the approach that was obvious was one of, sort of being the leader, standing up in front of everybody and organizing. And what resulted instead was a whole different way. And by the way, standing up as the leader, there was all kinds of angst and concern about different factions and different input that might conflict with each other. And instead, the resolution that arose was to be playful and engaging people in a joyful, playful way that was completely transformative. And everybody aligned with that joy and that playfulness and took responsibility in a way that they most likely wouldn't have if someone was up on a podium somewhere trying to dictate. And so this is the kind of thing, like we're taught what leadership looks like is somebody standing up and directing traffic, essentially, versus a playful engagement, because we tend to take ourselves so seriously, right? That we don't even entertain the richness and the potentials of play. So unlearning what we're taught to believe about the world and ourselves, let's first become aware of some of these things that we just receive without ever questioning them. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like and share Enlightened World Network's Facebook page and YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. The links are in the description. And as always, it's such a pleasure and privilege to have the opportunity to muse together in the morning and explore what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.